Good evening, everyone that is present physically and those that are watching in the virtual space. I am the Reverend Dr. Elbernard Jakes. I serve as the pastor here at West Point Baptist Church, but I'm also a very, very, very proud brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated here. That's where you should have clapped right there. You should have clapped right there. I'll invite you to come on Sunday to clap about me being the pastor, but clap about that right there. We are excited to have you here as we have gathered as an Illinois district. Just a couple of things I want to share with you. Number one, West Point has always been a church that has been on the cutting edge of social justice, social accountability, and social responsibility. And that's one of the reasons why we are here. This is nothing new to us. We are always excited to welcome our elected officials, and we are overly excited to welcome our mayor here on tonight. Do me a favor if you can, if you have cell phones, most of us do, if you can silence your cell phones as not to interrupt the great conversation that's getting ready to take place. And also, if you need to go to the restroom, you can exit the way you came in, go down the stairs, and the restrooms will be to your left. If you go on the left side, to the right for the men. If you go downstairs, Jerome will be back there to kind of guide you. Lastly, I always ask that whenever we have forums of this nature, that we please remember that this is a sacred space. We are still in a worship center, and we should conduct ourselves as such. We want to thank our great Chicago Police Department for being here. Thank you so much to the men and women that are here. Thank you for everything you do. And with that said, I would love to introduce and ask that you would stand and receive our Illinois District Director, Dr. Leonard McInnes.
Everyone, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this important discussion with the Honorable Brandon Johnson, Mayor of Chicago. Let me also recognize a few of our leaders in the audience, are the Illinois Executive Director, Brother Don Profit, our Midwest Regional Executive Director, Brother Quincy Banks, and the Illinois Assistant District Director, Brother Alexander Williams. Since its inception, Alpha Phi Alpha has been at the forefront of voter education, community transformation, and has a long history of advocating for the communities that we serve. Our membership is not devoid of men who understand and take seriously the foundational principle that political apathy and silence are never options when human lives are on the line. Alpha men have been trailblazers at every level of government, raising their voice and leaning into their passion on behalf of the least of these. Through our national program, A Voteless People is a Hopeless People, Alpha Phi Alpha emphasizes not only the need to get souls to the polls, but the importance of voters and those in the citizenry understanding what's at stake, policies that impact their lives, and the ways in which we can help to shift the conversation. The framers of our republic, though flawed as they were, understood that within a democracy, the people must engage, the people must hold accountable, and the people must vote. To do this, awareness of the most critical issues facing our towns and our neighborhoods is the first criteria. Tonight's Fireside Chat is an opportunity to engage one of the more consequential mayors in the nation. We do this at a most precarious time, and we come to this conversation with a deep awareness that men of Alpha have never shirked our responsibility to convene people, critique ideas, build institutions, and gather stakeholders. This is who we are. And so tonight is representative of our call not just to fraternity, but our call to be citizens of the city and indeed citizens of the world.
As a resident of Chicago and a UIC college student, I have the privilege of representing the College Brothers across this great city and beyond in the great state of Illinois. I implore the younger generations, the faces that look young and youthful, just like mine, to critically engage with this forum. The purpose of this event is to educate the public through high-quality public discourse. Events like these are far between and extremely valuable. Shape your opinions. Equip yourself to exercise your civil rights and civic duties. And most importantly, enjoy the program. Thank you.
I would now introduce our moderators, and then we'll have one of our college leaders introduce the mayor. I will begin with Mr. David Griggs. As a global leader to my far right, David Griggs is currently a global IT manager leading people, process, and technology. Change for a law firm with nearly 2,000 attorneys. His leadership experience over the last 25 years covers wealth management, investment banking, global trade, and consulting for Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Northern Trust. As a minister of the gospel, Griggs is the founding pastor of Believers Fellowship. Believers Fellowship is a non-traditional Christian faith community rooted in Chicago, but serving believers in Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi, and Indiana. He has preached and taught in many places, including on a mission trip in East Africa. As a community servant, Griggs is an active member of the Chicagoland community. He has served in a variety of community leadership roles for community organization and rose from president to treasurer to board member across the Chicagoland area. Griggs is a lifelong Chicagoan who is married with one daughter, and he is a proud life member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. His education credentials are from DePaul University, Lake Forest Graduate School, Cambridge University in England, Christian Bible Institute, and the University of Minnesota. Please help me welcome Brother David Griggs.
I'd now like to introduce our second moderator, Brother Joel Johnson. Joel Johnson is the TASC president and CEO Joel K. Johnson is an advocate for individuals and communities that are dealing with trauma, substance use disorders, mental health challenges, family disconnection, and social, racial, and economic injustice. From the front lines of clinical care to nonprofit and executive leadership, he has maintained a steady focus on ensuring health, dignity, and opportunity for all. With a multifaceted approach of program services, public policy, and community partnership, Joel leads TASC's efforts to address the everyday realities and structural barriers that impede people's opportunities to thrive. As internationally respected expert in behavioral health, Joel was elected in 2021 to the board of directors in the National Association of the Addiction to Treatment Providers, NAATP, and appointed to the City of Chicago Board of Health, a 9-member body that advises the mayor on public health matters. He was also named to both the Cook County Equity Fund Task Force, which advises the county board's president's administration on strategic investment to address historical disparities and disinvestment in Black and Latinx communities, as well as the Illinois Opioid Remediation Advisory Board, which makes advisory recommendations to the governor's Opioid Prevention and Recovery Steering Committee regarding the use of 55% of settlement proceeds that are allocated to the Illinois Opioid Remediation Trust Fund. Joel currently serves as the chair of Chicago Alliance for Collaborative Effort, CACE, a coalition of over 30 highly effective, mission-driven human service organizations in Chicago. CACE members make up a significant portion of Chicago's safety net, providing daily resources and services, as well as life-saving emergency services to over 2.8 million community members in the region. Please help me recognize Joel Johnson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor Brandon Johnson was sworn in as the 57th mayor of the city of Chicago on May 15, 2023. Mayor Johnson began his career as a public school teacher, first at Janier Academy in Cabrini Green, and then at Westinghouse College Prep on the west side, where he experienced firsthand how school closures, unemployment, and gun violence impacted his students and their communities. He then went on to become an organizer with the Chicago Teachers Union, where he led multiracial coalitions to defend neighborhood schools from privatization, reduce high stakes, standardized testing, and expand access to state funding. Mayor Johnson was elected Cook County Commissioner of the 1st District in 2018. During his 5 years on the Cook County Board, he led efforts to pass the Just Housing Ordinance with prohibiting housing and discrimination against formerly incarcerated people, legislation to secure legal representation for immigrants facing deportation, and coordinating COVID-19 resources for low-income seniors in nursing homes. In 2018, Mayor Johnson was elected Commissioner of the 1st District of Cook County, where he led the effort to pass the Just Housing Ordinance, which prohibited housing discrimination against formerly incarcerated people. As Commissioner, he also collaborated with colleagues to eliminate the gang database, secure legal representation for immigrants facing deportation, and advance recognition of the Indigenous Peoples Day. In the wake of civil uprising in the summer of 2020, he organized the Cook County Board to commit to the budget for Black lives, bringing new investment in healthcare, public transportation, internet access, and affordable housing. Mayor Johnson and his wife, Stacy, live in the Austin community where they are raising their children, Owen, Ethan, and Braden. I would like to welcome Mayor Brandon Johnson.
Thank you.
And so just to give you a sense of the run of show tonight, we'll begin with opening remarks from our mayor, and then we'll move to the moderators for their questions, and there will be some time after the moderators for audience questions as well, all right? And if you have questions, you should see one of the individuals here to write your questions down, and then we will take it from there. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'll try to keep my opening remarks brief so that we can get into the questions. I'm grateful to this incredible fraternity, Alpha Phi. Thank you all for your leadership and your commitment to justice. I think that tonight's conversation is certainly timely, particularly at a time in which our country is experiencing the level of consternation and division that exists right now. I do want to acknowledge another brother, though his color is a little bit different than the color in this room. The alder of the 4th Ward, Lamont Robinson, is here. Thank you for being here tonight, sir. And so with that, we'll turn it over to the moderators.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Mayor, for joining us. Not a lot going on lately, huh?
It's pretty chill right now, yes.
No, you've had a couple of interesting hours in the last 48 hours. Notwithstanding, I told you a little earlier, caught you on the press conference earlier today. I think you and the rest of our elected representation did a great job of your role in this political theater, but speaking truth to power. And but before we get into all the heavy stuff, I think we want to just start with 25 years ago. Where did you think you were going to be today? What does the kid from the West Side think that he wants to be when he grows up and ending up mayor?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So truthfully, I thought the job that I would eventually have, one day become a principal of a school, perhaps run a district, maybe, a university. I thought that my trajectory would, maintain my presence in our education field and system. Public education, as I quote oftentimes, at the expense of the state, particularly in the South, after all, is a Negro idea. And those are the words of another brother, W.B. Du Bois, right? And so I was on this trajectory to have, influence in our education system. And it's something that's still important to me. It's something that I believe is the right of all residents of our city and our country. But clearly, God had another plan. My wife, used to give me a hard time because this is the first time in our marriage where I've only had one job. And of course, that job has a variety of activities that I get to participate in every single day. But, you know, teaching in our public schools really was the joy of my life, and that's something that's still critical and important to me.
Well, you continue to pour into the youth, so this is just an extension of that work. And so, again, thank you for your sacrifice and service to the city of Chicago, and your wife's sacrifice and service to your children. We all know what that's like, and so we applaud you for even taking that step.
Thank you. And here's the thing, and I should just be very, very transparent here. The reason why I went into education is because I didn't want to pastor my dad's church. I'm going to be honest with you. So listen, Reverend Jakes, I appreciate the work that you were doing, but I was running from my calling because I just figured if I teach middle school, even if I'm acting in rebellion, the Lord will still say, well done, good and faithful, right? So, you know, who knows, but, you know, Reverend Jakes, your job is secure. I will not be applying for the job at West Point.
And there's still superintendent of Sunday school, so don't laugh too hard. But no, so we have a series of questions in different categories, and if that's all right, we'll jump into it. The mission of Alpha Alpha is Alpha Phi Alpha develops leaders, promotes brotherhood and academic excellence while providing service and advocacy to our communities. And those words are intentional because we represent communities around the globe that look different and have different needs. And so where we are positioned as a chapter or as individuals, we lean into those communities and provide the specific things that they need. And Chicago is so different. It's a tapestry of cultures and people, both born here in this city, have never left, people who've migrated here from parts near and far. You've been in office now for a couple of years. What are your top 3 priorities for the coming 2 years?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So first of all, I've really enjoyed my time as mayor of Chicago. You know how Chicagoans treat their mayors, right? It's everything, right? You know, from potholes to economic development to senior services to building housing. And, you know, for me, the top priorities will always be, 1, community safety. You know, really driving violence down in our city. This has been a challenge that we've had in Chicago for well over 60 years. If those of you, Generation X, you remember the 90s, where, you know, those summers were awful. You know, 900 to almost 1,000 homicides per year. In fact, I remember in high school in the 90s where, you know, there were certain outfits you couldn't wear, right? I mean, whether it was a starter jacket or, you know, MC Hammer pants with polka dots, right? I mean, these were very extreme circumstances because violence was just so pervasive. So it's always top of mind for me. The second thing is affordability. Because for me, what is it to have a safe community that people cannot afford to live in? What good does that do? But also, if you can afford to live in a community but you don't feel safe or you experience safety, that doesn't help us either. When you think about the average price of a home in some of the other major cities, $1.1 million. The average price of a home in New York, $900,000. Average price of a home in Los Angeles, rent $4,500, $4,200 in those respective cities, versus here in Chicago where we're talking anywhere from $250,000 to $350,000 for a home, $1,200 for rent. Now we still have work to do to drive these prices down, but also to drive violence down. But one of the ways in which I believe we can do both of those things, which is my 3rd priority, is really economic growth, to grow our economy. If there's one thing that I do know that we need to do as a city, we have to repopulate the west and south sides of Chicago. Families that have been forced out because of school closures, the lack of access to housing, the dismantling of public housing, the lack of access to economic opportunities. We have conservatively space for 400,000 more people in the city of Chicago. That number really is as high as 700 to 800,000 people. And so driving violence down in the city of Chicago, building more affordable homes, and growing our economy so that we can repopulate the west and south sides of the city of Chicago, those are my priorities.
I'm glad you shared that, Mayor Johnson, and thank you for being here, by the way. In repopulating those sides of the city, what are some of the programs that your administration is promoting?
Yeah, it's a great question.
To
So-
draw non-black and brown people to those communities, because ultimately the city can't grow with just black and brown only.
It's right. In fact, last year we had a population growth of about 22,000 more people moved into the city of Chicago. It's the first time in over a decade that we actually had a population increase. But when you look at those folks who are moving into the city of Chicago, they're not necessarily black or brown folks. And the challenge has been we have not made the intentional investments. And with the support of Alderman Lamont Robinson, we passed a $1.25 billion bond investment, which I'm happy to dig in a little bit more. But that investment includes building more affordable units. And so here are three things that we've done. One, we have a program called the Missing Middle, where we are developing owner-occupied homes, right? So it's an opportunity for developers to develop on wide swaths of land where the individuals can live and rent out, because the ultimate goal is to create generational wealth. I think you've seen this study by the Urban League where the average wealth of Black Chicago is 0.
Right.
So we're literally waking up every single day breaking even. It's the theme song, right, of The Wiz. Well, not the theme song, but one of my favorite songs by Michael Jackson, You Can't Win. And then you can't even get out the game, right? That's literally what's happening to Black Chicagoans. And so this Missing Middle program, we started off in places like North Lawndale, Inglewood. We have 5 of the 6 developers, 5 of them are Black, 3 are women in particular. So that's thing one, the Missing Middle. The second thing is working with United Power, vacant land that the city owns. We've turned that over to community organizations where we have provided open space land to develop affordable housing in the 20th Ward, the 24th Ward, the 9th Ward in Roseland. The initial down payment, if you will, I believe 75 lots, of which 73 homes have been built on them. There's another 125 that we have coming down the pipeline. There's also green social housing, where we're creating a brand new program that doesn't require support from the federal government to basically cap rent, where there's a non-for-profit that essentially creates a revolving loan. And then with those dollars, every time we build a unit, those dollars come right back within the apparatus that's gonna hold the revolving loans. There's one more that I just failed to mention, so there's actually 4. We just cut the tape on a process where you don't need as many parking spaces to build construction when you are building near the public transportation system. And so that's gonna reduce construction costs as well as rent. We have another program that we're moving, the ADUs, or they call them granny flats, where you can turn your attics or your basements into units. These are just some creative ways that we are moving to build more units. We're on pace to build 10,000 affordable units by the end of my first term, but we need 100,000 in order to really drive the price of housing down in Chicago.
So you alluded to this in your first answer to my question, and so it's a touchy subject, right? In 2013, we closed 50 schools, and a lot of controversy, not well received, but I'm the product of public school educators, my mother, my wife, my mother-in-law, my aunts. Most of the women who made a significant impact in my life worked in the system that you worked in, but what I'm noticing is there's still under-enrollment across the school system. And many of those 50 schools, a significant portion of them now, 12 years later, are still empty. And so the planning, the execution of the plan just didn't come off as that administration had hoped. So fast forward, data would suggest that 58% of the public schools are below 70% enrollment, which creates another problem with respect to infrastructure and resources. What's the plan?
Yeah, thank you for that question. One of the things that I believe that further radicalized me was the school closings. I've, never faced anything that personal and that was so blatantly racist. They use excuse. First of all, it was about saving dollars, right? Which has been proven. We told them that you weren't going to save any money doing it, and that's why we're still in the predicament that we're in right now in the city of Chicago with the deficit that we just had to address. And then they said it was for academic success, and it turns out that children who transferred over to new schools that received, we call them receiving schools, it wasn't like they experienced that much of an academic upswing. Because of that poor planning, to your point, we now have buildings that have not only sat empty for over a decade, but in order to get those buildings back up to par, just from the standpoint of what they were initially designed to do, we're talking about millions of dollars. It was probably one of the most gross, negligent acts by an administration in the history of this city. There are over 1,000 children that the system never found. Could you imagine in another community where 1,000 children go missing from a school district? There's no account for them. They didn't register anywhere else, not just in the city, but the country. We track these students. And so the plan now is, there's a couple of things. One, we just moved on something called the Sustainable Community Schools model. There are 20 schools that we have designated as sustainable community schools where the community takes control of that particular school community, and then the school community determines what this school will look like and how it will address whatever those issues are that are unique to that particular community. We just added 16 more. The reason why I'm lifting up sustainable community schools is because we need to reimagine how we use our school buildings. You're right, until we grow our population, these schools were built for the capacity of sometimes 1,000 to 3,000 students. However, when you think about the needs that are in our community, whether it's job training, whether it's affordable homes, there are ways in which we can convert some of these buildings into affordable units. We need investors to take part in that. But these schools really can offer up more than just a 7 to 3 p.m., or a 9 to 4 p.m. When you think about the needs that our families have after school hours, it's one of the reasons why I believe that young people congregate in areas where some people don't want to see them in, because there's just not enough activity inside of our school communities. So we have to, in other words, reimagine how we utilize these spaces, whether it's the conversion of sustainable community schools, building more affordable homes, having job training centers, help parents get their GEDs, partnering with the community colleges of Chicago. There are a host of things that we are not just considering, but working to put in place so that it just doesn't become yet another effort to shut down a building. It becomes blighted, and then we don't see development in that particular area for over a decade. That's what we are working desperately hard to avoid. And one of the ways in which we're pushing to have more development in our school communities is really challenging the state of Illinois and the ultra-rich in this city, in this state, to pay their fair share in taxes. There are so many different investments that we can make in our school communities. We have not even begun to scratch the surface. And so I'm moving in the direction that is, unique and different than other administrations, because I see these buildings as not just empty space. I see it as opportunity.
Continuing that theme.
Let me do a quick follow-up, because something you said was very interesting, and I watched my mother walk in the door, right?
Okay,
When she
you
came
gotta get
in.
it together
So
here,
she
right?
reminded me of
Yeah.
something. The community schooling idea is very interesting, the shared space. My mother helped lead a team that brought the first comprehensive school-based clinic to DuSable High School. And then fast forward maybe about 8 years ago, I helped to bring a school-based clinic to CVS, right? Partnering with Chicago Family Health Center. And so, mental health behavioral health is my space. I know you have this passion to reopening clinics. You reopened services in Roseland. What are your thoughts about more partnerships with federally qualified health centers, federal dollars, to expand not only the mental health, but community health options in some of these schools that have a lower enrollment and space, and using some federal dollars, despite where they're coming from, to help expand your own goals.
Oh, look, you're spot on. And look, the federal government has a responsibility to contribute to the residents of the city of Chicago. We are literally a donor state. So we send more to DC than we get in return. In fact, most blue states, we're standing up red states across this country. And you're absolutely spot on. Hinton Elementary School in North Lawndale on the west side of Chicago had a health clinic and a grocery store inside that school community. And 2 administrations ago did not think that that school was worthwhile saving. And now that school it's abandoned still in North Lawndale, and it sits right in the middle of a neighborhood. And whether it's mental and behavior health services, whether it's access to food, whether it's access to furthering your education or job training, these are the type of innovative ideas and ways in which we have to think about modernizing government, right? We have to collaborate, bringing our services together, partnering with community-based organizations, partnering with the faith community to ultimately drive investment in our communities. If we're gonna have a safe and affordable city, and I believe we will be the safest, most affordable big city in America. I believe that with all that is within me. We have to think more strategically about how we partner to ensure that our communities can experience the vibrancy, quite frankly, that is happening in other parts of the city. Thank you.
Following up on that theme, Mayor Johnson, One Summer Chicago, great program for youth and in gaining employment for them over the summer. I'd love for you to expand on what your long-term vision is and how you measure the success. And then a second question after that, what is your administrative policy on returning citizens to the city of Chicago and the neighborhoods that they'll return to?
Yeah, these are really excellent questions, you all. So, look, I believe that there's a case to be made for more investment in youth employment. You know, I fought hard to make sure that in the budget we secured at least 29,000 positions, right? That was 1,000 more from the previous year. Now, we were able to hire 31,119 young people for summer jobs, a 50% increase since I've taken office. And bear in mind, those positions go up to the age of 24. Youth, and the definition of youth has extended. It's not like Generation X, right? I was married at 22, right? And so, you know, when I see a 21, 22-year-old, I think they've grown. But in this economy, boy, I wish my father-in-law would have let us live with him. I mean, that could have saved me a whole lot.
Indeed.
You know, but may he rest in peace. He supported us in so many different ways. But, you know, we have to ensure that these young people that go up to the age of 24 have these opportunities. Now, here's the thing, though. 50,000, maybe even more this year. I believe almost 55,000 young people applied for jobs. So this notion that somehow that our people do not want to work, that is a lie from the pit of hell. Can I go there for a second?
Absolutely.
It's a lie. And so the ultimate goal is to have as many people who want to work, we want to have an opportunity for them. I think the other goal is to create year-round positions, right? Look, I don't know if any of you had summer jobs growing up, but I know that I did, and I'm one of 10. So when I got that first check, y'all know where that check went. It went to your mother. I mean, my mom was like,
I thought you were going to say those polka dot hammer pants.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah, and those steel toe shoes with the gold clip, those were very Alpha Phi Alpha, weren't they? Yes. Y'all remember those gold tips on the top of your shoes? Okay. But yeah, year-round positions. And then, you know, as far as like how we, ensure that these positions are available, we have to continue to fight for revenue. And then I think the last part about, reentry, with the support of the Black Caucus of City Council, we created an Office of Reentry, and we put resources in it. And so our chief or our director is Joseph Mapp. And we're working hard to make sure that we place these individuals in opportunities to make sure that they can have a pathway to productivity. And look, too many of our people who have been justice involved have been justice involved because of poverty or addiction, right? And I know that from a personal aspect. My older brother who had untreated trauma, never dealt with some of the issues that he faced, and died addicted and unhoused. And that's why when I was a Cook County Commissioner, I passed the Just Housing Ordinance, because it's hard to find stability if you don't have anywhere to live. And that's why we're investing in housing in Chicago and being even more strategic about creating non-congregate setting shelters. We just invested $40 million in our shelters in Chicago. It's the largest investment for shelters in the history of Chicago. Too many of our family members are coming out of jail or coming home from prison, and they do not have, just the launching pad, if you will, or just a stable place to be able to live, and then to get the resources that they need so that they can move on to productivity. And so whether it's youth employment and whether it's the Office of Reentry, these are investments that are going strictly to neighborhoods that have been historically locked out of opportunities, and those are our communities. One of the things that actually bothers me, I'm just gonna be honest with you all, is when people say that Mayor Johnson is not doing anything for the Black community. That pisses me off, quite frankly. And it's the reason why it's so upsetting is because people use that talking point to undermine me and to undermine our efforts. Because let me just make this point emphatically clear. Those who oppose my administration, they know exactly who I've been called to serve. And they would do everything in their power to undermine the investments in Black Chicago, just like they did when I wasn't mayor. The same people who are critiquing me are the same people who disinvest in our communities. So much so that I'm under investigation by the Department of Justice because of the concentration of our efforts in our communities. And so that's why it's important that our young people, the Office of Reentry, building more affordable homes, these economic opportunities for our people, it's critical that we hold the line, because the last thing that I'll say is investing in Black people is not a crime. The real crime is disinvesting and defunding our communities. And that's what we have to overcome.
So just a quick follow-up to that. In relationship to your crime reduction strategy and jobs for youth and creating more housing and ensuring that there's funding for reentry returning citizen programs, does that all fit within your crime reduction strategy? And just to talk a little bit about that without dealing with the police and et cetera, can you expand a little bit on your vision for crime reduction?
Yeah. Look, we have a poverty epidemic in our country, and Chicago is not exempt from that. Right? I mean, right now, if you're under the age of 18, 1 in 4 people under the age of 18 are poor. And I'm talking about not the poor that we thought we had growing up. So the way I describe it is I grew up low income. It means we ate every day, we just didn't like it, right?
That's a good analogy.
We're making spaghetti tonight. That's just a good old tradition of the Johnson family. We're gonna eat that for the next 3 nights, right? But I had friends who were poor. Now, look, I've had my moments, right, growing up in our home where the lights weren't always on, the water wasn't always on. I've shared this story, and my kids look at me like bewildered. I would explain to them about the orange extension cord from our window to the neighbor's window and what that was like growing up, just to hold on, of course, until Dad got paid again. And so not addressing poverty is irresponsible, right? And so that's why we talked about my main priorities. Growing our economy is so critical. And so the youth employment aspect of our investments are key. So let's just look at Austin, for instance, the 15th police district where I live, where violence has run amok, right? And disinvestment has certainly been the prevailing form of governance for a long time, not just in Austin, but in Inglewood and different parts of the city. But last year, we hired almost 1,700 young people just from the Austin neighborhood. The 15th police district saw a precipitous decline in violence in every single category, significant decline. I do believe that there's a correlation between the youth investment and violence reduction. You mentioned earlier the Roseland Health Clinic, as well as Garfield Park, where we have mental health services inside the library. On the Lower West Side, in Pilsen, we've reopened a mental health clinic. In Roseland, for instance, this time last year, there were about 5,900 appointments made. This year, almost 11,000 appointments made for mental and behavioral health care. Our people are utilizing these services. Why is that important? 40% of the 911 calls have been mental health crises. That's why I expanded the CARE program, the Crisis Assistance Response Engagement, so that when someone is having a mental health crisis, you have a paid mental health provider that can show up to that scene and to provide support. Now, policing plays a part, right? But it's policing and mental health services. It's policing and growing our economy. It's policing and building more affordable units. But the last thing that I'll say is, when I became mayor, the case that I made with our superintendent, and the case that I made with the entire city of Chicago, I said we need to invest in more detectives. We need to promote more detectives because you all know this. It's hard enough to deal with the tragedy of a loss. It's even harder when the person is still roaming the streets of Chicago. And so now, because we revamped our Detectives Bureau, we now have a 76% clearance rate in solving violence, because that serves as a deterrent. If people know they're going to be held accountable, they're less likely to commit these crimes. But it's not the same strategy of old, where we just believe that every single investment has to be law enforcement. What bothers me about that is, of all the things that our community needs, why is the only answer law enforcement?
That's right.
With all of the needs that we have, that's what you're coming up with? Think about it. In the 90s, we had 2,000, almost 3,000 more police officers, and violence was worse then. There is no direct correlation between the number of police officers and violence reduction, right? And so that's why I've taken a more full force of government approach, that asking police officers to be social workers, marriage counselors, police officers get calls for everything. And we have to have a system of care that frees up law enforcement to deal with the more serious and critical forms of violence, and then allow for other professionals to show up to scenes to deal with the other crises.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let's stay on this topic a little bit. Across the street this weekend was a shooting, and part of the president's comments and his theories about Chicago. But notwithstanding Labor Day weekend, Chicago is trending to have the lowest murder rate in 20 years. And so, law enforcement, detectives, what's working?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And let me just say, the hardest, the most difficult part about my job is that every morning, my first call at 8 o'clock in the morning is a call from my chief of staff of everything that happened the night before I went to, right after I go to bed. And I go to bed thinking about community safety. It's the first thing that I think about. I try, Reverend Jakes, to get up and pray first, but the first thing I'm thinking about is, what did y'all do while I went to sleep last night in this city? And it's just one of those things that unless you've lived in a community where violence has been pervasive, it's just hard to explain to people. And, one tragedy, one shooting, one homicide, one too many. And when I think about the proliferation of illegal guns that are coming through our streets, like just a couple of weeks ago, our police department worked in coordination with federal agents to get over 170 guns off the streets of Chicago. But what's really, really wicked and frightening, quite frankly, is that we have these switches that can be attached to a gun and it can turn it into a machine gun. Where, 10, 15 years ago, you can go to a shooting scene and maybe you see 10 to 15 shell casings. Now you're seeing 70, 80, right? And these guns are coming in from Mississippi, coming in from Indiana, Louisiana. And so part of, I believe, what has worked effectively is when we coordinate with the federal government to get illegal guns off the streets of Chicago, it reduces shootings, right? Shootings are down 40%. Shooting victims are down 40% as well, is because there's been real collaboration around how we address the illegal trafficking of guns. But I think the other part that's working is, this is something that I believe is worth fighting for, you all. The safest communities in America all have one thing in common. They invest in people. Look, I live in Austin, so you know the neighboring community, Oak Park, just to the west of me. You won't see a bunch of police officers roaming the streets of Oak Park. In fact, they're offended by that idea. But here's what you will see. You'll see families in the parks. You'll see well-funded schools, right? You'll see economic development and advancement. And so I believe that what's working is that we're taking this full force, holistic approach where we are investing in people. Here's something that I just think it should lift up. I think this will be encouraging for Alpha Phi Alpha. This year, we just got the numbers for our community colleges, and our enrollment is up. The number one subgroup that's enrolling in our community colleges over the last few years, and this year is no exception, the number one subgroup that's enrolling in our community colleges are young black men. And they're getting the call, the charge. Look, I get it, you all. Sometimes there are, members of our community that do not express the best in the hopes of our ancestors. But what you all have the ability to do and what we can do together, we have to charge our young brothers to find their purpose. The moment that they'll find their purpose, I believe the better lives they'll lead. Booker T. Washington, what fraternity was he in? I don't know, what was he in? Okay, well, Booker T. Washington, in his book, he probably would have been, he wrote, the book he wrote, Up From Slavery, is one of my favorite books. But one of the things that he says in that book, and it still resonates with me today, he said the difference between a black boy and a white boy is that a white boy knows his legacy and is reminded of it, where a black boy doesn't know his legacy. And so if a white boy messes up, he's reminded of who his father, who his grandfather, who his great-grandfather is or was. And I believe that we have an opportunity to pour into our young black men in this city and give them the sense of hope and purpose. And we're not just asking individuals to sign up in our community colleges for 4-year degrees. We're talking about being able to take courses that will get them trained in the trades. Just last year alone, over $11 billion of new investment, 30,000 construction jobs. We have so much investment that is coming down the pipeline. We're gonna need the next layer of workers. And these young brothers are seeing opportunity and they're looking to take advantage of it. Now it's our responsibility to find more of our young brothers so that they can see the opportunities that exist and that they know that these opportunities are for them. This is not coincidental. This is not accidental. This is on purpose. I want the young brothers in this city to know that they have a mayor that loves them, that cares for them, and that's willing to invest in them. Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Amen.
Mayor Johnson.
I almost ended with, see, Dad, sinners have souls too. I just want my dad to know, though I'm not going to take over your church, I still read the Bible and I know the scriptures.
Mayor Johnson, I was informed that you don't have as much time remaining as we thought.
Okay.
We're going to have to go a little bit rapid
Okay.
fire on questions.
Yeah.
So we'll fire off a couple of questions. If you could keep your comments brief in terms of responding. I want to get to a couple of the audience questions that came. As you're halfway through your term, will you run for re-election, and how will you shore up black support?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Look, the investments that we're making are transforming this city. I don't believe that we can repopulate the West and the South Sides in one term. You know, right now my responsibility in this moment is to continue to make the investments that will build safe and affordable communities, and in due time we'll make a decision.
What can you do about food deserts in impoverished communities and get quality grocery stores in those communities?
Yeah, it's a great question too. I mean, I think part of it is, and there are some grocery stores that we are in conversations with in multiple wards. But one of the things that we have to do is that we have to continue to create more affordability so that these grocery stores know that there's a population that actually needs and want them. This has been an ongoing challenge that we've had in Chicago for a very long time, but there was one moment where we were thinking about the government getting more involved in creating grocery stores, but there are some incentive packages that we are putting together to attract more economic development, and in particular grocery stores.
Given the CPS budget that was passed last week and the impact it has on the city budget, will a real estate tax increase be part of your next budget proposal for 2020?
So, you know, I think it's too early to determine what the whole package will be. What I will say though is the $1.6 billion that the state of Illinois owes the city of Chicago, we have to collectively fight for that, you all. This is not Mayor Johnson's calculation. This is not something that's imaginary. The state of Illinois, really quick, some context, passed a law that by 2027, the evidence-based funding model would be fully funded. That's their responsibility. Look, we need to push the ultra-rich in this city and this state to pay their fair share in taxes. If the state of Illinois were to give 12% of what they owe, we would have a surplus right now. That's something that we need our state reps, our state senators, particularly Chicago delegation. They should be speaking of this louder than me as mayor.
What are some of the current mental health initiatives that you have identified in your policies and vision for the city?
Yeah, so again, whether it's reopening our mental health clinics, expanding our care program, these are just some of the initial investments that we've made. We're collaborating with our public health department as well as with DCASE to hire artists to provide mental health support services. One of the things that we did fight for in the latest teacher's contract is to increase social workers, counselors, psychiatrists, and psychologists within our school communities. There's a budget that is dedicated to grow the number of behavioral health care workers in our district. We have to do that. I think one quick note here is that when doctors prepare for war in the United States military, they send those doctors into our communities to train them, because the level of trauma that they're going to experience in war-torn countries is akin to what they're going to experience in Garfield Park, Austin, Roseland, Inglewood. So the investments that we make in our communities around mental health support services is critical to the lifeblood of our city.
And this, finally, from the audience, with the deployment of the National Guard, possibly, what do you think the real underlying issue is there? Why is this happening? It's being framed as an immigration enforcement deployment, but what do you perceive as the real issue why this is happening?
Yeah. President Trump is failing as President of the United States of America. You know, look, he's been the master deceiver. He wants to, you know, divert attention away from his failures. He promised the people of this country that he would respond to the economic needs, and he has not delivered. He was never intending on delivering. We saw the greatest shift of wealth into the hands of the ultra-rich than any other time in the history of this country. That includes slavery, you all. That the budget for ICE The only budgets that are bigger than ICE is United States military and China's military. This is not about safety. He is literally gutting the critical programs that would drive violence down in the city of Chicago. This man is a master deceiver. He is incorrigible. He's an irascible man. I can find one other adjective, but the point being is he is unfit to lead this country. And what I've said repeatedly, if he was serious about driving violence down in Chicago, why take $800 million away from violence prevention? He just cut the ATF's budget by 30%. That's literally the department that gets illegal guns off the streets of Chicago. He's taken away food, he's taken away medicine, he's defunding our education system. This individual literally said out loud that we won't have to worry about future elections, that the last election was the last one. If we don't stand up and take this man seriously, we will see the dismantling of our democracy. And that's why, as mayor of the city of Chicago, I don't take this position lightly. But one thing for sure, we always stand up to giants. And whether it's 5 smooth stones or whether it's a bow and arrow, we have to use every single tool that's available to us to bring down this monster. In Chicago, we're fit and we're built for it. This is the city that said keep hope alive. This is the city that said that yes, we can. We have built the democracy as we know it through the fight and the struggle for our existence in this city. Working class people, black folks in particular, and to quote one more Alpha brother, Dr. King said that if we can figure it out in Chicago,
That's right.
he said we can do it anywhere in the world. Well, let's make sure that the Alpha Phi Alpha brothers' words remain prophetic today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
Please join me in giving the mayor another round of applause for joining us tonight. Thank you to those in the audience in the virtual space. We thank you to our moderators, Brother Joel Johnson, and we have our good brother, Brother David Griggs, and to our Illinois Assistant District Director. Listen, we're going to do a couple of photos real quick before we leave. We want to start with the mayor and the moderators and leadership, and then Brother Don Prophet will take us from there. Again, thank you all for coming tonight.
Can our district leadership please join us on the stage? Our district and regional leadership, please join us on the stage. Quickly, 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 brothers.